All right, welcome to the Sustainability Working Group. So did you want to share your screen for the document? You have it ready?
Let's see. I have it ready. I can see if I can manage to share it. It's always exciting to see if I can do it somehow. Let's see. All right. Can you see it in a reasonably large font typeface? Okay, cool. And of course, you are seeing all my tabs, which is probably a problem, but all right. So we've had a break for quite a few weeks now with holidays and conferences and traveling and stuff. There has been a little bit movement forward in the meantime. I think we have come to U7 is the last one, and then we have 12, 13, and 14, and a few more. That's the use cases, and the 8 and onwards were moved a while back to the parking lot. Because we have a question around, we had a moment where we talked about finding a good way to let second parties make claims about the sustainability of a project, sustainability related claims about the project. But since we are talking about making this into go through an ECMA standardization track, what's it called again? I'm sorry. The scope and program of work. This thing here, you added a few points there, which kind of argues in favor of putting them back. Make it possible for others. That's what I read, at least from this. Specify a framework for trusted assertions of project state by third parties. That's a need, and it can be solved by just saying, following the standard by here's a JSON file, but we also add information on who makes the claim. And then people downstream receiving that file somehow or finding it can make a judgment for themselves if this is a trustworthy claim. So we can make it happen, and I think I'm pretty happy with the program of work and the scope here for the ECMA TG4 track. So if that's okay with you, Steve, we can put those few extra fields at the bottom, which we put into the parking lot, to take them out of the parking lot again.
Well, I mean, keep in mind that just because a task group has got a certain charter doesn't mean you have to throw everything into a single release. So, keep that in mind. You don't, if we identify what are the minimal viables and then design it in a way where some of the other roadmap items could be added in the future in a non-breaking way, I think that would be ideal, because we do have some more complicated things here that are going to take some time to work through.
Yeah, might be a little bit thinking that needs to go through, but the important parts are just the project states and the how to identify the entity making a claim. And I think for this case, that's all that's needed.
Okay.
So it's not like it's a large stretch to make it work. It's just,
I think there's likely an opportunity for this group to work with the common lifecycle enumeration team on because they also have a need for non-first parties to assert the life cycle of a product, right? Like and the manufacturer goes out of business, for example,
Yeah.
somebody needs to make that assertion because, the first party isn't. So we likely can design it in a way where both of these ECMA specs will literally share the same mechanism for how that's done.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
A recognizability for stuff like that would be. Is there any facility like that in CycloneDX already? Like who makes a claim?
Cyclone,
Except that
well,
you have the SBOM author field.
yes, and we are adding the ability in Cyclone 1.7 to have, what are they called? Um, um, it's basically the ability to, I'm at a loss for words right now. It's the ability to specify a very, very specific field in the CycloneDX bomb and state, what service, tool, person, organization, whatever, actually added that data. So it's
Right.
yeah, it's that. But the bill of material formats, whether it's SPDX or Cyclone, doesn't matter. They're not timed series specifications,
Right.
right? CLE, on the other hand, actually is, because the life cycle of events is, you have to be able to capture time, which is what it does. We don't necessarily have to make the entirety of this specification time series, but when it comes to the assertions of second parties making claims, that part of it certainly does need to be time series aware.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I can see that we could complicate things a little bit. So let's leave it in the parking lot then, and pick it up for a possible next revision.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Personally, I'm at rest with that topic for now.
We actually do have a CLE call directly after this, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'll put it on the agenda, just kind of an inform to Jordan and to Benji, to kind of let them know that there's an opportunity to collaborate with this group on
Awesome.
that capability.
Awesome. That sounds good. All right. So use case 12, maintainer claims the project is intended for commercial use. I'm unsure if this is the right place to put it. There is definitely a need for a project to communicate what the project is intended for. Right now, with the regime is let the buyer beware or let the user beware. Nobody cares, which is fine. But with the European Union Cyber Resilience Act introducing a few more requirements, this expression here becomes extremely useful and important. Now, we could discuss on how to do it, but the reason I think this is worth adding is, first of all, it is an opening for creating some sustainability related, adding an additional sustainability related information. For example, who the open source steward organization is for a given project. Now, for the larger ecosystems, not necessarily ecosystems, but foundations that have maybe hundreds of projects under their wing, I feel like this maybe doesn't make sense, because it's the foundation who decides. If Apache Foundation says that Apache Foundation is the steward for Apache Foundation's projects, then so be it. There's no need to make an explicit claim like this. But that's not the case for open source projects out there that are published on other types of ecosystems. Roman, you wanted to comment on something?
Yeah, I agree. This is definitely important point here. I'm thinking how better to rephrase it. I would suggest to avoid, mentioning these type of things in the specification itself, because right now we just don't know what does that mean, commercial use or in course of commercial or something. We are among other standardization folks working on the clarifications for these definitions and on the standards, implementation standards of the C array. Maybe we can generalize these points, something in between. I need kind of help by the foundation or by potential steward or something like that, but avoid terms like intended for commercial use, and definitely not mention C array in specification, because there will be other regulations and etc. I am a little bit afraid that it would lead to further complications, and especially for those lawyers who would treat this differently.
I've put quite a bit of thought into it, this little bit here. I'm following the work that the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group is doing around this topic. It's still a discussion, it's still open, but when it comes to the language in the Cyber Resilience Act specifically, it's pretty clear. It applies to the portions that are have anything related to a steward being involved. Those requirements only apply if the project is ultimately intended to be used in a commercial setting, or intended for be placed on the European market while being monetized. Now, the question here, which I think is important to make clear somehow, and we can probably pick better wording, and we can also change the whether or not we mention the EU Cyber Resilience Act, but the critical information here is the answer to the following question: who gets to decide what the intended use is? For most projects, it's the project owner. They get to decide, is my project intended to be used in a commercial setting, meaning that for example, they already live up to a stricter level of professionality or response time or certainty, or I mean not certainty, but confidence in how well the library, for example, works and how reliable it is, or is it only a hobby project? Because right now, specifically for the Cyber Resilience Act, it just assumes everything by default is a hobby project unless somebody tells otherwise. And that's why I think it's important to have this a field like this somehow represented somewhere. It needs to be possible to say explicitly, not imply, but explicitly say that this is actually meant for commercial use. It's still it could still be a hobby project in a sense, but it's you can open the door for living up to additional requirements, the related requirements, which are already pretty lightweight. It's basically make sure a few of the documentation requirements are in place. You have a security policy, contact information, and a couple more fields. Now, whether or not there will be other legislations out there, I don't know.
Yeah, there's going to be other ones. We already know this. We've got, well, lot of big companies have people in various world governments following legislation. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
One thing commercial use, I know what it means well, as Roman said, we're all trying to get clarity on what commercial use means. However, I understand the intent of what the authors of the CRA are trying to get at.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I do think the term commercial use could be misinterpreted very, very easily. For example, can this open source be used in a company? Yeah, and that company is a commercial entity, right? So there's ways that commercial use can certainly be misinterpreted. We cannot assume that users are going to read every single word of the standard. They're probably just going to look at the JSON and make assumptions and start filling it in.
Right.
One thing that we might want to do, and I agree, it's important to put the intent here. However, I think we might be able to do it in a different way where we're not using the terms commercial use, but it could be very easily derived, such as um, do you offer, do you offer this product for sale? Do you offer this project for sale? Do you offer commercial support services for this? Right?
Yeah.
If you have those two things, you can very easily derive commercial use, because in one piece of legislation, whether it's a CRA or something else, in one piece of legislation, it might mean that, well, you have to buy it. In another piece of legislation from another country, it might mean, well, you're getting money for support. So what is commercial? So
Yeah. So if I'm reading now some of the text in the recital 19 of the Cyber Resilience Act here, and the phrasing they're using here is let's see, give me a moment. Legal person who provides support on the sustainable this only covers free and open source software that are ultimately intended for commercial activities. That's the word the Cyber Resilience Act use. And commercial activities is used several places.
all right.
So for me, I wrote use because it's shorter.
Yeah.
But my point with picking this name is there needs to be something that talks about intention. The word intention needs to be somehow in there. The commercial needs to be in there, and activity needs to be in there, or a synonym of it. So I've been limited a little bit from what's going on there. And of course, I'd only have the European Union as an example because they're the one which are like first in class there. They're leading the pack when it comes to this type of regulation. And I'm kind of making an assumption here that if all the legislations out there will be introducing stuff like this, they will probably be following in the examples by the made in the Cyber Resilience Act, because if everybody does their own thing, it's pretty easy for people to imagine that that will never work. And here the European Union has a first mover advantage just by basically saying this is how we're doing it. And
it's also very, very vague in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
And as a first, as the first comers, there's certainly room for improvements when other governments come along with similar legislation. I do think it is useful to separate out the sale of something from the
Yeah.
support of something.
It's in
Now,
this.
it might not, at the end of the day, it may not matter in the context of the CRA, but it might matter when other legislations come out.
Yeah. This in the CRA, they make a big effort on identifying what it takes for you to be called a product with digital elements.
Right.
And there are a bunch of criteria there. One of it is that, well, it talks about what the product is a little bit and what digital elements, and it's quite loose in order to allow the interpretation. You cannot have strict language and precise definitions. Otherwise, you are just excluding use situations where it really should apply. Where the law should apply. So in a sense, it kind of has to be a little bit fuzzy because we want to ensure that all the meaningful and interesting and necessary places where we want to increase security actually have their security increased by giving the requirements to the manufacturers or in their cases. So the interesting situation comes here when we are talking about products that are published as open source, free and open source software, because it is strictly speaking being put on the market in European Union. But since it has this license as it has, there are some exceptions going on here. And the interesting middle ground here comes when we have to figure out say, for example, if a web framework, which is a complicated piece of software with its own dependency graph, but completely likely that it's open source, maybe even written as a hobby project, and somehow received success. It is a product in its own right, in many ways. But it's not being monetized necessarily. And the question about monetization is also like a fuzzy thing, because yeah, you are allowed to receive donations, but if you receive enough donations so that it covers more than your expenses, you might be said that you're actually getting a profit, and then you are not monetizing it in the sense where you are actually getting you could run a business on it, and then that opens the door for like do you operate as a business or not, and if you keep it over somehow over some whatever threshold involved here, you suddenly have to operate as a manufacturer with the increased documentation, and you have demands, and you have to register your product in and put a CE mark on stuff on your product and all that stuff. Roman, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks. I'm looking at this use case 12, or at least trying from the intended purpose perspective. So if we build this specification for sustainability, I presume we are mostly aimed to the open source projects and the maintainers, not like the companies, right? Let's pretend I'm a manufacturer. To be quite honest, I don't really care to put this expression to my open source project. So if I do know that my project is intended for commercial use, I wouldn't communicate it, right? So probably those regulators will come after me anyway. But what's the point to emphasize it once again and to disturb my lawyers about that? On the other hand, if we pretend how this use case 12 could be helpful for the actual maintainers, I'm trying to think what's the problem we're trying to solve for them. For example, as you mentioned here, if I'm a maintainer and I'm actually seeking or looking for a steward or for somebody who can help me because I think that my project may be used for kind of commercial purposes, or I do have evidences where it's used. And as a responsible open source citizen, I would like to bring more support and more resources, or communicate better that I have the mature project that completely makes sense to emphasize that, yes, I'm looking for some sort of support because I have mature project. But even in this case, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable, or I would be comfortable to say, hey, my project is intended for commercial use, because I don't really know unless I'm manufacturer, right? But for manufacturer, I don't want to communicate it. Like, so that's what I'm coming from.
The thing that I
Thanks.
like for the sustainability is, forget about the CRA and the commercial use for a moment. The thing that I like about the sustainability part is that if you had a way to declare that as a maintainer, you actually do offer commercial support, whether it's like an individual actually doing it and I can get a block of time, whatever, or through a company, it doesn't really matter. But if that open source project is important to my business, important to my application, having that little flag that says, yes, I actually offer support, and here is what I offer above and beyond just responding to issues on GitHub, for example. I think that would be really useful for the consumers of that.
Yeah, but that's a little bit different than what we're talking about here, though.
It's a little bit different, but it's a commercial activity in the context of the CRA, which is why I was saying might want to think about splitting the type of commercial activities out, because they're going to be important to different types of people.
Yeah. Another thing I had in mind here is that I think it's healthy to consider a typical, let's call it life progression or something like that. You start as a small project, you write something which people find attractive, it's interesting, they start using it, it grows, it turns out to find some success. It's still open source, but at some point, the maintainer is thinking, can I make a living out of my open source project? Right now, the steps to make a living from open source are not easy. You have to have quite a lot of users that are willing to pay somehow. You have to find a way to monetize it by offering support, for example, or hosting, or customization, or some open core kind of plugin extension sales regime. What we have here with the steward organization is a kind of an in-between situation where you're still operating as an open source project, but you increase you're signaling also that this is okay to use in a commercial for commercial activities, in the sense that it's the manufacturers, the ones who are actually earning money on this, they are not completely alone when taking liability for their product. They will get a little bit support from their upstream maintainers. And specifically the maintainer we're talking about right now, if they say, I'm here for you, doesn't mean a lot more than just making sure the email works and that you promise to respond in a reasonable time frame. That's enough for downstream users to say that the risk associated with using a particular component is a little bit lower, or maybe even acceptable, because they know somebody's taking care of the module or the library or the framework, and then they can maybe get some attestations for there has been some due diligence performed, and then things are okay, and we can move on and check the next module. Now, whether or not this is money is involved here, I think is a bit, we have to be careful here, because if saying that something is suitable for use in a commercial for commercial activities is not the same as saying that this is being used in commercial activities. So the discussion we're having now I think is super useful, because it's not the point I'm trying to get across here with the intended for commercial isn't to say that I intend to use it, but rather that it is intended for. It is if people who have a commercial requirements to security, like a commercial level, and whatever, enterprise level, or just it's part of something that is network exposed and now has to be secure because of the laws that are coming, then the maintainer is participating in the security regime that makes the manufacturers be able to be compliant. And that's the thing here. It's more about like saying, I'm going to help you be compliant. That's a goal here. Now, I get it that wording as it is right now might create confusion. And certainly if other legislations out there start doing things, then we are in trouble. But I'm a bit unsure now. I still think something like this is incredibly important to add here. Maybe it could be enough just to specify that you are using or have selected or have been assigned a steward organization. It kind of depends on the project and the ecosystem they are operating. Like an Apache Foundation project doesn't get to select their steward. It's the Apache Foundation, for example. But for something published as a framework on CPAN, we have to find a way to make it work there, because they could be able to select I can imagine that you can switch between steward organizations. Say, they are my steward, will assist me in performing due diligence. As a manufacturer, I will go to the steward and say, I'm available for response in a timely manner if there are any security issues. All that would be fine. But it kind of hinges on a claim that you're going to do this, that you can live up to. And if you're not making the claim, we have to start assuming stuff. And assuming stuff is a source of risk. And that's why I kind of like to have something explicit in here. Does this make sense, what I'm saying? I get it, this to you, Roman, you're offering a little bit pushback here, but if you should think about what, if you take our discussion now into account, what would a workable middle ground be like in your mind?
Yeah, this is, please don't take it as a pushback. As I mentioned, this is a great point, and actually I'm right now writing the suggestion in the comments to this. I need to drop in 3 minutes, but I will continue to draft my suggestion. Probably we can agree on the, on the right wording that can support the intention of this use case, because my main point was it's not necessarily need to be like a compliance checkbox for maintainers to say, hey, this is for commercial use, because I do know that this is the part of the CRA and I want to express this, keeping in mind that I would like to express my kind of compliance or desire to be compliant with CRA. I just wanted to get rid of these, because if we want to be it as a standard, as a sustainability standard, probably more flexibility needed here.
Yeah.
But I will write down suggestions. Yes.
Yeah, cool. That's very much appreciated. And your point that taking the word, that's the text, the references to the Cyber Resilience Act, take it out. I think that's completely meaningful. But the problem here is that with the intention comes the idea that you have a steward. At least when it comes to this Cyber Resilience Act, and having an organization like a steward in this situation, and with the requirements and the intention of that organization, is really good idea. It's a sensible idea that the European Commission have come up with. So in a sense, they picked a name, an open source steward, so we kind of have to use that at least for now. And yeah, some of the laws might make up their own thing. We don't know about that yet, but I really hope they don't. That's like creative lawmakers is the worst thing. They have to make laws based on reality, not what they wish. But now the CRA folks in the European Commission have made this law. They've added this one creative thing, and it turns out it's actually not a bad idea at all. So we need to and it's in the law, so we kind of have to take it into account somehow. So I'd love to hear your comments. I don't think we landed anywhere here, other than maybe should we change it from commercial use? How about using the phrasing that is in the Cyber Resilience Act by saying that intended for commercial activities? Is that an improvement? All right.
I don't know. Let's just maybe wait for his suggestions.
Yeah, we can do that.
It sounds like he was brainstorming and maybe writing a bunch of stuff while we were talking. So let's just revisit this during our next call.
All right. I'll add my comment there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do recognize that the interpretation I'm bringing into this here is maybe not the mainstream idea here, and that's a bit of a frustration for me, because while those involved in the Open Regulatory Compliance Working Group, they try to include all shapes and sizes of open source communities out there. They do have their own foundation glasses on. So they try to bring first and foremost their own perspective into this discussion. And my community is an outsider in so many ways. Well, we were first in many ways, like the first open source package ecosystem out there for a programming language was CPAN. So we're 30 years old today. Like we're the old guys in this particular space. So we made all the mistakes you can imagine all throughout, but also it means we had to try to. We also have quite a hard requirement to make things easy, upgradable, and think about forward and backwards compatibility and all that stuff. So things haven't changed a lot, which means we kind of have to, while other communities could be able to create the organizational framework and foundations based on learning from our mistakes, we haven't had the same opportunities in a sense, since we're trying to also be stable or predictable. So it's a bit difficult this year. So for me, this field opens the door for all those communities and projects out there who don't have an ecosystem, or whose ecosystem is anarchistic, like the ones CPAN has.
Sure.
So we'll put a green check mark on this, so we can let it sink in for a moment and maybe see if there's something that comes out of the org working group in the coming weeks. And then let's move on to use case 13 next time.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
I will, I'll get the video posted later today, hopefully. And yeah.
Yeah, nice. I'll add a question mark here to note that we have more to discuss here. And awesome. Let's see. I'm seeing that there was a chat message here. Okay, yeah, that was Roman saying bye-bye. All right, thanks for the chat. We're
on
on
time. Good
time.
conversation as always. All right, cheers.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Bye.